When local voters across British Columbia recently elected a new slate of mayors and councillors and school boards across the province, and in some cases overturned the existing council entirely, as in the case of the city of Vancouver, they were sending a message, in particular about crime policy and housing policy, which they thought were suboptimal and not really contributing to the best interests of their cities and neighborhoods. There's a valid reason why voters react this way. It's because cities are incubators, potential incubators, for what's best about humanity. From Manhattan to Marrakesh, cities are potential incubators of civilization. That's a term rarely used these days, but it should come back into vogue, especially as regards cities. Cities matter because metropolises can be understood as large petri dishes for experiments in human flourishing, and in multiple ways. For example, entrepreneurs can test market a product in a city in a way that could never happen in a town or a rural area. There's simply not the population to properly test an idea or a new product. The arts also benefit from the urban environment. Think of the Renaissance era town or city of Florence. It wasn't big by today's standards, but it was big enough for the time and for the intersection of money, commerce, and art, where those with money could buy a painting or a sculpture and put it in a church, in a museum, or in their own home. That's a 500-year-old development which still benefits us today. Scientific discoveries also occur within what is best described as the cross-fertilization of people and ideas. This was especially true before the internet. It's still relevant today, though. To walk down the hallway and check out an idea with a colleague, or drive across town and go over the results of a scientific experiment. That's why the top 5 cities for science are Beijing, Boston, New York, San Francisco/San Jose, and Shanghai. Beyond the commercial, artistic, and scientific potential of cities, consider what else cities can bring to civilization, including experiments in how to govern ourselves. In the Western world, the best example of this is ancient Athens, where philosophers and other citizens would gather and debate what the good life meant, what justice was. And, of course, ancient Athens was the birthplace of a nascent form of democracy. Or ponder how social movements arise in cities. The early suffragist movement, where the right to vote for women was pushed forward, would have been much more difficult than it already was if those who were suffragists were isolated in villages as opposed to major urban centers. In Great Britain, for example, 2 suffragist societies were founded in London and Manchester in 1867. In Canada, even after women received the vote in the early 1920s, it was Nellie McClung and 4 other suffragists who went after the existing disparity where women couldn't be appointed to the Senate. Even in 1927, they gathered in the Edmonton home of McClung to pursue this goal as well, and eventually brought the case, the person's case as it was known, to the Privy Council of England, which overruled the Canadian Supreme Court, which had denied women the right to be appointed to the Canadian Senate. The internet now allows for ideas and people to interact and go viral daily. Still, there are some aspects of urban life that really can't be replicated on the internet or in rural areas. Certain aspects of human flourishing are often only possible in a city because specialization requires a mass of people nearby. Think of architects and engineers who build skyscrapers. The Art Deco masterpiece that is the Chrysler Building in New York City could never have been built in a rural area in a town because the office space wasn't required there. It was possible to build it in Manhattan. Its builders needed a metropolis, New York City. Similarly, ponder great urban parks such as Manhattan's Central Park, Montreal's Mount Royal, or Stanley Park in Vancouver. Or consider the urban beauty of Kyoto, Japan, where the combination of temple architecture, parks, and nature, especially in fall, offer up red, yellow, and gold sacrifices in autumn. It's beautiful. Another example of such urban exquisiteness is Singapore, where office buildings are required to include parks as part of their design, within their design. In that city, a biophilic skyscraper, as it's known, just opened with 4 stories of tropical fauna and 80,000 plants. In theory, such expensive, design-intensive projects could be built anywhere. In practical terms, great parks require metropolises and their money. Commerce and beauty also exist in smaller centers, and there's the possibility for other human accomplishments in rural areas as well. But the massive populations of cities, plus money, allows for the specialization and human flourishing on a unique scale. Back to voters and elections. Cities are akin to a living organism where human flourishing can thrive. It's why cities matter. It's also why politicians and others have to be careful not to damage the organism that is a city with policies on crime or housing or taxes that are fundamentally anti-city, and in that sense, anti-civilization.